Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be going over my through hike on the Appalachian Trail and how much I paid each month and how much I paid in total for the entire trip. I am going to be breaking down into categories. How I kept track of how much I paid. I had the Google Sheets app on my phone, and every time I made a purchase I would put it into my phone so I know exactly how much I spent and what category it was in. I broke it down into a few separate categories, and let's get into it. Starting off in June, I spent only 2 weeks on trail, so it's going to be a little bit less than some of the other months. My budget goal was $1,000 a month, and in June the total was $468. Breaking it down, I spent $169 in the food category, which is basically just grocery stores. So anything I bought in a grocery store, I just put it in the food category. And at hostels, I spent $153 in June. I definitely could have got that down a little less because I was only out on trail for 2 weeks in June, but I think I was still getting used to the trail, so I was trying to spend more time in hostels. I spent $27 on gear in June. I believe that was for the pillow. I started out with a Trekology pillow, and that one got a whole leak in it, so I ended up buying the Inland Equipment pillow. I believe that's what that $27 is for. Restaurants, I spent $98 in June. I have an other category, which was stuff that didn't really fit into any of these other categories. I have my Garmin InReach bill on that, which was $15. I think I had the middle tier one, so not the cheapest but not the most expensive. So I had $15 for the month of June for that. I spent $6 on fuel in the month of June. Alright, and I could have spent less. Like, I could have spent $0 on fuel because I had the flip fuel, but I just timed it wrong and ended up having to buy fuel because there wasn't any fuel in the hiker box, so I just had to buy fuel that month. But I only had to buy fuel one other time on the trip, so I think I did pretty good with that. So the total for June was $468. So since I spent under $500 for 2 weeks, I stayed on budget that month. Next month, my first full month on trail was July. The food category, I spent $393 on food at grocery stores. Now, at this point in time, I was also buying some snacks in town. Stuff, instead of just going to restaurants and stuff like that, I was also buying some town food at grocery stores to help reduce the price of restaurants. So some of that price is a little inflated there. I also spent, in hostel category, I spent $159 that month, which is funny as it was a full month and I spent pretty close to what I spent in June. Next up, in gear, I spent $165. I did have to buy new shoes in Connecticut. I believe that was the reason why that's $165 there. In restaurants, I spent $182 in the month of July. I was trying to limit myself to one restaurant visit per town that I went in. So while a lot of other hikers, they would go to restaurants for like multiple meals, I tried to buy, if I was going to stay at a hostel, I tried to buy one meal at a restaurant, and then the other meals I would buy at the grocery store if I needed more than one meal. Shuttles, I did end up paying $12 for a shuttle in July. I tried to avoid shutters for the most part just because I didn't like to pay the extra money if I could get a ride into town another way. And at that point in time, Wing It was giving a through hikers rides. He was following the bubble I was in, so I didn't have to worry about rides too much in that time period. Next up, I got my other costs again. That's going to be my $15 for my Garmin. That's all I have in there. And I spent $0 in fuel in the month of July. I do have another category, a fun category, which I spent $78 in the month of July. I know 50 of those dollars was canoeing in the across the Delaware River on the 4th of July. I'm unsure what the other $28 came from. I should have wrote it down, but I didn't. So I did do a few other things in the month of July with people I was hanging out with, but I can't remember exactly what it was. So the total that I spent in the month of July is $1,004. So I went $4 over budget, but I think I did pretty good. Sticking to my $1,000 a month budget there. Next month we got August. My food category, I spent $398 in food. It went up a little bit from July, but not too much, so I kept it pretty on par there. Now this is where it really went up. In hostels, I spent $274 in the month of August, and that's mainly because as I started getting further north, the hostels got more expensive, and there was a lot of times where we would have to stay in hotels too because it made it cheaper to split it with my family compared to just staying at hostels, because after Pennsylvania, a lot of the hostels go from being like $30 to $40 to being $50 or $60. So as you get north, that's what happens. So I did spend a lot there. The gear, I spent $196 there. I also bought another pair of shoes, which is, I believe that's probably the whole price of shoes. Maybe I bought one small thing there. But yes, I bought shoes in the month of August also. Next up, the restaurant category, I spent $162 in the month of August. So as you can see, I started spending a little bit less on restaurants. I spent $20 less on restaurants in August than in July. I think it's more because I think that's when Blue Jeans and Father Time left us to go south so they could get to Katahdin before Blue Jeans had to go home. So I was spending less time with people who had a lot of money, so we were going to less restaurants. I spent $25 on a shuttle in August. I believe that was the slack pack that we did over Mount Greylock. No, not Mount Greylock. Mooselock at the beginning of the Whites. So I spent $25 for that shuttle. I got my $15 for my Garmin description in the other category. Then month of August, I spent $11 on fuel. I have in the fun category, I have $25 I spent. I think we went to a movie that month. That's where that $25 went, but I'm not entirely sure. And then the total for the month of August, I ended up spending $1,105. So I went a little bit more over budget in the month of August. But that's just because things were getting a little bit more expensive when we were going up north. So I went a little over budget in the month of August. Next month was September. And this month, I also only spent 2 weeks on trail, I believe. Yeah, it was 2 weeks on trail because that's when I was getting to Katahdin and getting to where I flipped back down to Harper's Ferry. I did take 2 weeks off after I got to Katahdin. So I only ended up spending $94 in food in the month of September. Then I spent $40 in hostels. That would have been more expensive, but I did one work for stay in one of the hostels in Maine. Yeah, I did work for stay there, so that was $40 less, as well as when I knocked out my tooth, instead of having to get a hotel in the town that the dentist was, I got helped by a trail angel who gave me a spot to stay for the night, so I didn't have to spend a hotel there. Next up, I spent $162 on gear. So I ended up buying another pair of shoes in September. And okay, so I remember. So the month of August, I bought the shoes, and then I sent them home because I wanted to have them when I got home from Katahdin. And then in September, I realized when I was about to enter in the 100-mile wilderness, I had to buy another pair of shoes because my shoes were in a bad enough shape that I didn't want to wait that extra week. So I just ended up buying shoes there, which is why I bought shoes 3 months in a row. And then restaurants, I spent $80 in the month of September on restaurants. And then I have $65, $15 of that's my Garmin. I'm not sure what the other part of that is. Like I said, I should have written that down. Now, in the month of September is, like I said earlier, is when I knocked out my tooth. So I also ended up spending $958 for that dentist appointment to get that tooth fully extracted and get a replaceable denture in. So that's added to that month's total. So without that medical expense, my total is $442 for the month of September. And with that medical expense, my total is $1,400 for the month of September, which I do have to include that because that's part of the trail. If you get injured, it is a trail expense. Now, that being said, on September, I don't have any travel expenses for that because my grandparents were nice enough to pick me up from Katahdin. If they did not do that, it would have been an extra $100 for the shuttle ride to Monson, and probably another $50 for a stay in a hostel, plus a bus ride to Branson, I think it is. Starts with a B, I think. But whatever that big town is, but I would need a bus ride ticket to there as well as an airplane ticket back home. So that's something you have to account for because I did not have travel expenses for that. Month of October, I spent a full month out there. That's when I started going south from Harper's Ferry. Again, I didn't have any travel expenses because my grandparents dropped me off at Harper's. The food category, I spent $287 in food. Hostels, I spent the most money in the month of October. I spent $368. Part of that is because Virginia doesn't have very many cheap hostels, as well as it was starting to get cold, so I wanted to stay inside a little bit more. In the month of October, I spent the most I spent an entire trip on hostels, which was $368, which is kind of a lot. You could definitely have done that for less. But like I said, it was cold, and I just wanted to be more comfortable. I spent $95 in gear on the month of October. I'm not exactly sure what I bought there. But that's in there. If I think of it, I'll put it in there. And in restaurants, I spent $104 in the month of October. And then my other category, I have $30 in there. 15 of that is the Garmin, and I'm not sure what the other 15 would be. So the total I spent for October was $884. Up next, the month of November, I ended up spending $244 on food. I spent $236 in hostels. I was definitely staying in less hostels at the last part of my trip. I was getting more miles in between the hostels. But it was still pretty pricey because Georgia's hostels aren't cheap. And I did have to end up staying in a hotel one of those nights because that's when I ended up melting my shoes, so I had to get a ride into town, and they didn't have any hostels in the town. So that one's a little pricey. In gear, I spent $244. I did have to buy another pair of shoes because I ended up melting mine by the fireplace when I was trying to warm them up. So I could have done the trail in four shoes, but I ended up doing it in 5. So that was a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. I also had to buy a new water filter because when I was going to a max patch, I had my water filter freeze on me because it was just so cold with the wind chill and everything. It froze in my pocket, so I had to buy a new water filter there. And yeah, so that's my gear for the month of November. And in restaurants, I spent $77, which is actually the least amount I spent on restaurants in the entire trip. I think because by then I was hiking mainly by myself, so I'm not much one for going out to restaurants all the time, so that's why that's cheaper. Shuttles, I have on here $105. I'm not exactly sure why it was that much, because the only shuttle I can remember taking in that time period was the one I had to take in from the Smokies to get into, shoot, I forget the town now. But it's the one in the middle of the Smokies. I had to take a shuttle in there to get my new shoes. That was $30. So I'm not exactly sure where the other $75 came from. If I was to go back, I might be able to find it, but I'm not 100% sure. I just remembered what the rest of that shuttle price was when I was going through Irwin. I was waiting for my cold weather gear, and my options would either take a 0-day or slack pack. So I ended up slack packing back to Uncle Johnny's, and so that was the price of the shuttle to the trailhead for 2 days, which was pretty pricey, but I was trying to stay on schedule by finishing before Thanksgiving, so I was willing to pay it. So yeah, that's what that extra price was there. And I have $47 in my other category. 15 of that was my Garmin, and then I'm not sure what the other little bit of that was. So my total for the month of November was $952. So I did stay under budget in the month of November. So my total for the entire trip was we're gonna exclude the dentist trip for the first price, and then I'll give you the one with the dentist trip on the second price. The total without the dentist price was $4,854. My total, and then if we're including medical expenses, which that is a part of the through hike because I wouldn't have knocked out that tooth if I wasn't hiking. The total is $5,812 plus I have to include the extra $5,000 that it's going to cost me for the implant to put in there. I have not paid that in yet, but I am in the process of getting the implant done. So that would be an extra $5,000 to add to my trip. So it would be $10,000 and $10,812 for my total. And for traveling, my grandparents did pick me up from Springer also, so I did not have to pay any. I did not have to pay for a shuttle to Atlanta, which I believe was $100, as well as plane ticket. I also did not have to pay. So, if you are planning a through hike, you would have to add in the whatever it's going to cost you to travel from wherever you live to the trailhead. Make sure you do that, and then as well as I would plan for $1,000 a month is very doable as long as you have good self-control. Everyone I hiked around, they said I had more self-control than them, so I will say it is hard to do, but you can hike the trail for $1,000 a month. But that being said, I did have an extra $900 in medical expenses that were unexpected, so you need to make sure you have extra money for that, as well as extra money for traveling, and it is very doable. Yeah. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching my journey. This is probably going to be my last video out on the channel, at least for a while. So I appreciate you following along. Thank you.